on your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, a decision on whether to grant China permission to build a super embassy in London has been delayed until December. It says the government continues to feel pressure over a collapsed Chinese spying trial. Earlier, Tory leader Kemi Badenoch told LBC she believes Sir Keir Starmer misled Parliament over the case yesterday. Labour MP Alex Ballinger rejects that.
And I think it's unambiguous. It only can relate to the policies and the legislation under the last government. We've referred to China as a threat 15 or 20 times during that evidence. I don't think the government could have been more clear. To say that he's misled the House is completely unreasonable.
The first conviction of theft at the post office linked to another faulty computer system has been referred to the Court of Appeal. Capture was used before Horizon. An inquest into the death of former world boxing champion Ricky Hatton has been postponed until March. It heard earlier that it's believed he died from suicide. And Nestlé has revealed plans to cut around 16,000 jobs globally over the next 2 years. The company says it needs to change faster to secure its future as an industry leader. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 11 points at 94.36. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.15. LBC weather, largely dry and cloudy tonight. A few spots of drizzle in the far north and southeast. Lows of 3. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. If you like spy stories and you're worried about Britain's fragility, well, this has certainly been your week. The collapse of the China trial. Revelations that some of the most sensitive of our state secrets have been ripped out by Beijing and Moscow in recent years. The head of MI5, Ken McCallum, revealing earlier today that they have just broken up another Chinese plot. Indeed, in his annual update on the threats to Britain, McCallum said there had been a 35% increase in the number of people they were investigating working for hostile states.
That means espionage, including against our parliaments, our universities, our critical infrastructure. But now, states are also consistently descending into ugly methods MI5 is more used to seeing in our terrorism casework. My teams are routinely uncovering attempts by state actors to commission surveillance, sabotage, arson or physical violence right here in the UK.
Very bad, of course. But in our busy lives, working hard, looking after each other, worrying about bills, whatever, we mostly barely think about Russian spies or Chinese spies or Iranian spies. Is any of this a real threat to us at home? Even if a vast treasure trove of our deepest national secrets has been stolen by hostile governments, would ordinary people ever notice? Well, to get a wider perspective on all of this, asking how serious the threat we face really is, and to reflect on the collapse of that Chinese spy trial, I'm joined now by the former head of Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove. Sir Richard, thank you very much for joining the show. Can I start by asking your reaction to the collapse of the trial? Do you find the explanations given so far to be plausible?
No, not really. It's mysterious as to how the government got themselves into such a difficult position, because either we have a legal cock-up, which really is surprising when you have a prime minister who's a former DPP, or, on the other hand, it looks suspiciously like an act of appeasement towards China. I think you've got a clear choice between the two, and the government seems to me to be in a hole and still digging, making matters worse. I mean, the release of these 3 witness statements doesn't really clarify anything at all.
So the accusation or the suspicion of appeasement must still be there. Can I ask about this new Chinese super embassy? We now learn that it's going to be delayed, the decision on it, and for another few weeks. It's going on and on. But it clearly shouldn't be more than it should be more than a planning decision. And James Cleverly, for instance, has suggested that MI6 and MI5 should be able to make representations to the government privately about this huge new embassy. I just wonder your reaction. Yeah,
well, my personal view is that we shouldn't give permission for it in that particular site because of the likelihood, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's probably the case that quite a lot of sensitive communications cables run through or very close to that site. And we shouldn't allow the Chinese to have an embassy on top of them. I mean, why on earth are we giving them a site in such a sensitive place? You could stick them out of London, and we could offer them a piece of boggy ground in the Essex marshes where they can't dig down underneath it. And it's only 10 minutes by train into the city from there.
We could certainly do that. But, more seriously, I guess, a lot of Hong Kong democracy activists who are now in this country have been pursued, they believe, by agents of the Chinese Communist Party inside the UK. They're worried about the possibility of being apprehended and taken into the embassy. Do you think that's something that we should all be worried about?
Yes, I think we should. I'm not sure the Chinese would go quite that far on our soil, but they would certainly harass dissidents. And there are already cases of them running sort of private police stations, which are aimed at the activities of dissidents who are opposed to the government, particularly those who've left Hong Kong and come to the UK for sanctuary.
Can I ask slightly more broadly? There'll be an awful lot of people listening to this who will say, well, I understand why Russia's an enemy. They aim their missiles at us. They're clearly engaged in war on the continent of Europe, not so far away. But I'm much less worried about China. It's a long way away. They've never really threatened us or anyone near me. Why are they wrong, if they're wrong?
China is a rising power of considerable consequence. Global security is likely to depend in the future on some sort of balance in the relationship between the United States and China. China has massive resources, and if you read the documentation that supports the Chinese Communist Party, particularly if you go back to the 20th Party Congress, you look at the small print, the Chinese write these things down. It says quite clearly that its intention, that its plan is global domination by the midpoint of this century. Now, what do they mean by that? They mean creating a world which is aligned to Chinese authoritarian, autocratic values, a financial system which is bent to Chinese will, and, as it were, a position which binds countries into a relationship with China in which China is completely dominant. It is a threat to our values. It is a threat to our way of life. It is a threat to democracy. The Chinese have a different system with which we fundamentally disagree. And it's quite clearly written down and expressed, but no one cares to take any notice of it because these documents are very dense, difficult to read, only are read by experts, and then they're not properly explained or disseminated to us.
Very, very clear indeed. Sir Richard Dearlove, thank you so much for talking to LBC this evening. Now, I also thought this was a good moment to think about the wider threat to liberal democracy. There's no better voice on that than the author of Autocracy Inc, The Dictators Who Want to Run the World. That's the Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Anne Applebaum, who spoke to me just a little earlier. Did she think the alliance between Russia and China was a new level of threat?
It's actually an alliance that's broader than Russia and China. It's Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, and a host of other countries who have all concluded that the language we use, this language that we use to describe liberal democracy, freedom, the rule of law, transparency, accountability, is a threat to them. and to their kinds of regimes. And so they have begun to work together in different ways, through espionage, through political influence campaigns, through corruption, in Ukraine, through military cooperation, and elsewhere as well. And they've begun to work together to try to undermine us, unseat us, replace us, and to change the way the world works to be more advantageous to them. And it's taken a long time, I think, for people in our societies to wake up to the fact that, we might not think much about what's going on in Beijing or Moscow, but they do think a lot about us, and they've been focused on us for a while.
And what would you say to people who say, "Oh, that's all very well. I can see why Russia's a threat. They've got missiles pointing more or less in this direction. They've invaded Ukraine. We've had murders carried out by Russian agents on British soil. Our undersea cables are very vulnerable to the Russians. I get all that, but why should we be worried about China? It's a long, long way away."
And look, the Chinese also have an interest in penetrating, understanding, and influencing our political conversations. They want to create a world that is more in which commercial transactions are more favorable to them. They want to know at what level our technology is able to compete with theirs. They want to understand and influence our political systems. This is a power that now is really the ultimate surveillance state. China has created a massive system of control of its own internet and is seeking to expand that control to other places. I mean, they collect huge amounts of data everywhere that they can, not only in the UK, but all over Europe and the United States. They penetrate also into, we know, I certainly know this is true of America, into infrastructure, water management, electricity systems. They're trying to have levers in case it ever comes to a conflict or in case they ever need to exert influence on us. So they care a lot about what goes on inside our countries.
And we just got this decision, I think, being taken now next month as to whether to give the go-ahead to this huge new Chinese embassy in London, which I think would be the biggest Chinese embassy anywhere in Europe and one of the biggest in the world, an enormous complex. And there are lots of people, including Hong Kong dissidents, who are really concerned and worried about that, the quantity of espionage that could be taking place from it, what goes on inside it. Do you think we're right to be worried?
I think you're right to be worried. I mean, of course, the Chinese have a legitimate right to have an embassy in London, and it's very important to conduct dialogue with China. And actually, our relations with China in that sense are much more complicated than our relations with Russia because we have so much trade with them and we have developed this economic interdependence with China. But yeah, I mean, understanding that part of the purpose of the Chinese presence in the UK is to whether it's legal or illegal, whether you call it espionage or observation. I mean, part of what they're doing is collecting data and information, and just to be very aware of what that is and how it's being used.
You've spent a lot of your life defending liberal democracy, but when you look at China and you look at its long-term planning and its control of rare earths and the huge amount of effort and investment has gone into the Chinese military forces and the fact that they are alongside us, possibly even ahead of us now with AI, do you think there's a serious danger of the West losing any struggle with China?
I mean, honestly, the biggest weakness of the West now is the erratic policy of Washington towards China, this kind of failed trade negotiation, which seems to be producing a pushback. It's really important now that Europeans begin to band together, and that I include the UK. I mean, Europe in the broadest sense, not in the just purely institutional, begin to band together to cooperate militarily and in security and in espionage and intelligence as well, in order to protect their societies also from China. I mean, it's not really a race that's going to be won or lost in some near future or in some predictable way. And it's also not the case that there is anything inevitable about China. I mean, we could have a different conversation in which we pointed to all the weaknesses in the Chinese economy or the fact that the Chinese army hasn't fought anybody in a long time. So there are many reasons to be skeptical and to understand that we have a lot of advantages. And remember that our societies remain the most prosperous, the most free, and some of the most ambitious in history still, and we should take pride in that and make sure that we understand what our advantages are and why they're important and why they matter.
And thinking on the military side, if we think back to the Edwardian period in Britain or to the 1930s, there's a long tradition in this country of waiting until the last moment, till it's almost too late to rearm and confront the threat. Do you think we're in that kind of position yet again?
I certainly think that there is much better, much clearer awareness now of the Russian threat, the Russian direct military threat, which is a threat to Britain. I think China is a different kind of threat. What I hope is that the British understand, the public as well as the experts understand that the kind of war that's now being fought in Ukraine is a new kind of war. It's a drone war. It uses artificial intelligence. It uses electronic warfare in ways that have never been used before. And I hope that the British military establishment is watching that and understanding it, because that's the way war will be fought in the future. And I have the sense that there is a general sense of preparedness or an understanding that we need to spend more or think more. It's not just about money, it's also about planning. But is everybody really focused? Do they understand what could happen? That I'm not sure. It's also the case that the way these powers now fight is not strictly military. I mean, you've just said it. I mean, you have a Chinese espionage case in the UK. You recently had a story of a leading member of the Reform Party being paid by Russia. These are political influence campaigns. These are online propaganda campaigns. Being aware of all the ways in which the autocratic world seeks to influence us is important, not just for the government, but for the general public.
You mentioned online there, and clearly there's been vast disinformation campaigns conducted online. Do you think everybody listening to this should think thrice before believing anything they see on social media about politics?
Social media itself is not a good source of information. A good source of information is material that has been fact-checked, that's by newspapers and publications that print corrections. When you look for information, when you want to find out what's true and what's not true, find out what the original source is and who brought up the facts. I mean, after this program, look up me, look up Andrew Marr, find out what we've written in the past, who we've written for and where, because just random things you see online, might not be true.
I think that's really important. The world needs more sub-editors. Anne Applebaum, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And there is real political jeopardy ahead, I think, for the government with this China spy case, and it's showing no signs of slowing down. We'll get the latest from our political correspondent in just a few minutes, but you are listening to Tonight with Andrew Marr, and the time now is 6:17.
This is LBC.
OK, train from London to peaceful Peterborough.
Neen Park's this way, huh?
Gorgeous, wow. Never thought I'd be this into bird watching.
Did you see it? Lovely plumage.
Train home, brilliant day. Oh, gotta rent bikes next time to see the big lake. And more birds, obviously.
Download the Thameslink Railway app and save with advanced tickets. Thameslink Railway, where every stop is a story. Terms apply, see our website for full details.
If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, what you thought you were getting may not be what you ended up with. From unexpected site fee increases, running costs, a huge depreciation in value, many owners feel they've been missold. If you think this might be you, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive the compensation you're entitled to. Text ASSIST to 78900 to find out more. That's ASSIST to 78900.
Staysure. What is Staysure? Staysure is not just the UK's favourite travel insurance. Staysure is the confidence that comes with knowing that you're covered by the company with more 5-star reviews on Trustpilot than any other provider. A company that welcomes people of all ages with pre-existing medical conditions for single or multiple trips. So stay sure with Staysure Travel Insurance. UK's favourite relates to number of 5-star Trustpilot reviews, T's and C's and verifications at staysure.co.uk/reviews.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
It's 6:19. Now, yesterday we were talking about the jeopardy for Keir Starmer in the parliamentary row over the collapsed spy case. And that hasn't gone away today. There's been a debate in the Commons with lots of fiery and feisty stuff being said. Here is the former Security Minister, Tom Tugendhat, in full flow.
My home has been broken into, my files have been ransacked, somebody has been put into my office by a hostile state, and two parties are playing politics with it. This is national security of the United Kingdom. The elected people of Tunbridge chose me. They may have chosen wrong, but they did. The elected people of other parts of the United Kingdom chose everybody else in this House. It is up to them to choose who represents them. And yet here we have two individuals seeking to extract information from us. And the government's response is not, as mine was, do everything you can to make sure the prosecution works, but no, process. Well, who the hell's side are you on? This isn't about the bureaucracy, this is about leadership. We're not sent here to be civil servants, we're sent here to lead the country and to make decisions.
And you may remember that Tom was in this studio yesterday when he told me that he thought the Prime Minister would be in deep difficulty if it turned out that his assurance that neither he nor his ministers were involved in the collapse of the trial isn't true.
As you know, I mean, the way in which Keir Starmer, as leader of the opposition, hounded the then Prime Minister for what he said was misleading Parliament, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander.
So a really serious moment for the Prime Minister. Look, if this was the case, we say
if it's the case. Look, I'm not accusing him, but I'm taking him at his word, and let's see where the evidence leads, because that would be very serious. Misleading the House is a very serious offence.
Well, I'm joined now by LBC's political correspondent, Aggie Chambre, who has been across this story all day. Aggie, I said fiery and feisty in the Chamber, but did we learn anything new today?
I think fiery and feisty is very fair. You heard that from Tom Tugendhat there. And I think there is a huge amount of anger, especially on the opposition bench. In terms of what we actually learn, I think one of the key things listening to the Commons earlier is actually that it seems like at least the Labour government and Labour MPs are trying to put blame, instead of at their own front door, on the door of Stephen Parkinson, the head of the Crown Prosecution Service.
And reading the media, that seems to be working a bit. The focus seems to be turning to the DPP rather than the PM, as it were.
I think there is that. So Emily Thornberry, of course, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, questioning why they didn't prosecute. He has spoken to MPs and basically suggested that they were 5% away from being able to prosecute, and lots of questions from people today. One Labour MP saying to me, there are real questions outstanding about why the CPS did not prosecute. I still have questions why. And they say there's the Prime Minister on one hand is getting attacked because people thought he intervened, and now Tom Tugendhat, referencing that clip there, is annoyed because he didn't interfere. And Stephen Kinnock, the Health Minister, was asked this morning if he had full confidence in Stephen Parkinson, and he said, I'm not going to comment on that.
That in itself is very interesting. In the Commons, after those Commons exchanges, Kemi Badenoch said that she thought the Prime Minister had misled the Commons. Now, he's got a very strong legal mind, and he was involved in similar exchanges with Boris Johnson in the past. I would be surprised if he made that kind of really big mistake. But if he did, just explain to people why that matters so much.
I think you are not the only person who'd be surprised if he made a mistake like that. People talking about the fact he has a lot of legal experience before the Commons, and also he has now had a lot of experience at the dispatch box, basically suggesting it is unlikely. But that is the accusation from Kemi Badenoch today, saying that he did mislead the House with those comments yesterday, saying that no minister was involved, no special advisor was involved in this. So the ministerial code, Andrew, is clear that if ministers give inaccurate information to Parliament, they must correct the record. If they don't do it, they'll be expected to offer their resignation to the Prime Minister. There is no way of compelling this, but there is the Committee of Privileges. That's a select committee. And you will remember they can recommend sanctions like, for example, with Boris Johnson, they recommended a sanction of 90 days away from the Commons, which then triggers a recall petition, which then can lead to a by-election. So it can be, Andrew, extremely serious.
It's the nuclear option if you're Prime Minister. Looking more broadly, however, I don't quite see where this story goes next. I know that a lot of MPs want to see the minutes of that crucial meeting with Jonathan Powell made public and WhatsApp messages made public and so on. But this is becoming a story sort of dying because of the quantity of detail and possibly eventually going to expire from sheer boredom.
Potentially, but there are still lots of questions, I think, for the government to answer. In terms of where it goes next, I think there are lots of different avenues, lots of different ways the government could respond. You touched on it there with Richard Dearlove, but the fact that there are suggestions from some people, including from him, that China should not be allowed to build their new super embassy.
I was going to ask you about the embassy, because that's been the news today. It's been delayed
again, exactly. And him suggesting to you that actually it should be, well, he's suggesting in boggy land.
In the marshes,
in the marshes in Essex, but saying it shouldn't be in London. So I think there could be more pressure on the government to delay that again, or even move that outside of London.
I think having the former head of MI6 saying we do not want this embassy is a big moment.
I completely agree. And also, as I mentioned in the beginning, I think there are going to be continued calls for Stephen Parkinson, the head of the CPS, to come before MPs in a public setting and say something else. And that's the pressure on him from MPs tonight.
A muddy, murky and increasingly perilous story. Thank you very much indeed, Aggie. Now then, another day, another piece of pitch rolling of preparatory warnings about the November budget from the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves. She told The Guardian today, "I want Britain to be a great place for talent, for entrepreneurs, for successful individuals, but I do think that those with the broadest shoulders should pay their fair share of tax." Another broad hint, perhaps, that she's going to raise capital gains tax or perhaps inheritance tax. Let's hear now from Sanjay Raja, the chief UK economist at Deutsche Bank. Sanjay, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
The Chancellor also said that wealth is obviously different from income. And I thought there was a broad hint there that she's not going to go for any kind of income tax, but the other things are absolutely up for grabs in November.
Absolutely. I think the indication that we've gotten from the Chancellor is that we do have a fiscal hole to fill. And last year was all about employers, the corporation tax. From a national insurance perspective, that put a lot of pressure on firms. This time around, it's the worst kept secret in Westminster. We know tax rises are coming. And ultimately, we know that it's the broadest shoulders that will bear the brunt of that. But we are expecting quite a bit of tax rises. Everyone will likely pay something, but more likely this will be skewed towards those at the higher end of the income distribution.
I want to ask you a bit more about what you think broadest shoulders actually translates to. But before we do, you mentioned the black hole. Right. We've seen that's the sort of the gap between revenue and spending and all the rest of it that she has to fill somehow. And she's also said that she might cut spending in some manner to do that too. But there have been figures between sort of 15 to 20 billion right up to 40 billion. What is the kind of market view at the moment about the size of the black hole that she has to fill?
Well, Andrew, we've been saying since just before the summer that the black hole, so to speak, sits somewhere between 20 and 30 billion pounds. We've stuck to that range. And I think from what we're hearing from press, from different analysts, think tanks, the market's very much consolidating and coalescing around that range.
So that's not quite as bad as it might have been. It seemed to be a few weeks ago.
No, absolutely not. Perhaps there's some good news, better news from the OBR heading into this budget. Now, of course, Rachel Reeves will get a second update from the OBR, the Office Budget Responsibility, on Monday. That's going to be very important. That will take into account some of the big economic revisions that we've had on GDP. That will take into account the VAT error that HMRC accidentally pushed through. And it will also set in stone some of those market conditioning assumptions. But if it is 20 to 30 billion pounds, that's very much in that sweet spot for the markets.
And that seems to be a figure that, again, the markets think that Rachel Reeves could deal with without breaking her promises on income tax and VAT and employee national insurance.
Well, this is where I think it becomes very interesting, because if you look at what she said today as well, she also talked about potentially increasing the fiscal buffer. Now, she did say there will be trade-offs, but the only way you can double or triple this very, very small £10 billion fiscal headroom that she's maintained in October last year, that she kept in March this year, is by going big. You can't create a patch-through Frankenstein budget hitting 10, 12 different measures to try and raise and fill that fiscal hole. You do need to hit income tax, national insurance, VAT, or God forbid, even hitting corporation tax.
Sounds like she's determined not to do any of those things, which brings me back to what she might therefore do. And it does seem to me that inheritance tax and capital gains tax are probably the obvious places she's going to go.
It feels like that. Capital gains
tax, maybe gambling taxes.
Low-hanging fruit fruit for almost every chancellor. We know that sin taxes will increase, alcohol duties will go up, tobacco duties will go up, vape taxes will be introduced next year. Those things will likely see some increase to try and get some of the low-hanging fruit in terms of raising cash receipts. But of course, capital gains, we think that's going to be one of the more important things that she looks like. Dividend tax, that's going to be another thing that she will probably look at to try and raise that tax rate. Will she look at something like a broad-based wealth tax? We don't think so.
She's more or less said, I'm not going to do a wealth tax. It's too complicated, too controversial at this stage. For a party scoring 15 points in the polls, it's probably not very sensible.
Absolutely.
Roger, thank you very much indeed for coming in. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Now, there have been hopes this week that Monday's ceasefire deal in the Middle East might allow President Trump to direct some more of his attention towards Ukraine. And with Trump speaking to Putin today and hosting Zelensky in the White House tomorrow, we might be able to find out if a big moment in the Ukraine conflict is near at hand. Time now is 6:30 and Amelia Cox has news headlines.
The former head of MI6 has told LBC the government should reject plans for a Chinese super embassy in the heart of London. Speaking on Tonight with Andrew Marr, Sir Richard Dearlove says he fears it would be a threat to sensitive communication cables that run close to the site. Donald Trump says he has been congratulated by Vladimir Putin over his success of achieving peace in the Middle East. The Russian president told his American counterpart during a phone call that he believes it will help in negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. And the first conviction linked to another faulty computer system used by the Post Office has been referred to the Court of Appeal. An application has been made by Patricia Owen's family following her death in 2003, 5 years after she was convicted of theft. LBC weather largely dry and cloudy tonight. A few spots of drizzle in the far north and southeast. Lows of 3 degrees.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
We're asking whether Labour MPs are really considering a defection to the Green Party.
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
Train to Pevensey Bay. Beach, mates, cooler. Oh,
Danny, you got the hummus, yeah? Of course.
now this is what it's all about. Time to relax.
Huh? Frisbee? No, you two crack on.
Just made the train. Now home to over half the beach from my bag. 10 out of 10 day, though.
Download the Southern Railway app to book tickets and save a third off group travel on off-peak journeys. Southern Railway, where every stop is a story. Terms apply. See our website for full details.
Do you know your state pension age? No. Maybe you're not sure, or you don't know how to check. It's so quick and easy to check online. All you need is your date of birth. Knowing your state pension age helps you think about your future. So check yours today. Search state pension age on gov.uk and simply enter your date of birth. State pension age. It's good to know.
Play Set for Life from the National Lottery. Winners get 10k every month for 30 years. You could win on repeat. Set for Life. Play now on the National Lottery app. Terms, rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:32. We may be about to see another critical moment in the Ukraine war because President Zelensky is due in the White House tomorrow, asking President Trump for Tomahawk missiles to hit Russia. Meanwhile, this evening, President Trump's been speaking to President Putin. Edward Lucas is a writer and consultant specialising in European and transatlantic security. Edward, very good to have you on the show. I've just read the readout from President Trump after his call with President Putin. No mention of Tomahawk missiles, no aggression, very soft soap. Do you think that President Putin has yet again pulled the wool over his eyes?
Well, I think certainly the idea that flattery will get you anywhere is pretty baked into the Trump White House. But it's also true that the weather changes very frequently. And it was only a few months ago that we saw that appalling scene in the Oval Office with Vance and Trump berating President Zelensky. Then things have warmed up quite a lot. We saw the rather unsuccessful meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska. And so I think that a day of flattery from Putin doesn't necessarily mean that Zelensky's visit is doomed. He's going to go in there and say, look, Putin's the loser, and you like backing winners. We've fought, as on the back foot, but we've really fought. We've done quite well. We can do even better if you support us. And he would also, I think, tell Trump, you've done fantastically well in the Middle East. You've pulled it off against all the odds.
As has Putin, of course. I might just read out a couple of the things from what Trump says. He says, I actually believe that the success in the Middle East will help our negotiation over Ukraine. And he talks a lot about trade. So he's obviously offering a kind of a gift or something in terms of a bonus if the war is ended. But then he says that he is going to meet Putin in Budapest, Hungary, to see if we can bring this inglorious war to an end. So that's a second face-to-face meeting. Is that significant in your view?
Well, it's always significant when the leader of the free world, which I suppose Trump sort of more or less is going to meet the man who poses the most immediate threat to the security of Europe. I'm cautious about predicting a very concrete outcome from that meeting in Budapest. It'll certainly be a feather in the cap for the Hungarian strongman Viktor Orban, who's facing a very difficult election coming up. But I think the key thing is it's not words that matter, that's deeds. And what the Europeans have shown is that they can keep the Ukrainians fighting even when the wind from Washington is blowing very cold. And so, in a way, Trump's leverage over Zelensky isn't as great as he might have thought a few months ago. And I think for the Europeans, it's all a matter of keeping the momentum going and supporting Ukraine, keeping those strikes up on the Russian infrastructure, particularly oil refineries. We see all sorts of signs of things going quite badly inside Russia. We even saw a demonstration the other day in St. Petersburg.
Yes, a very rude song about President Putin being sung right in the middle of the town.
Don't play that song on the radio.
I certainly wouldn't. Far too rude for our listeners. But so, Edward, in the end, you think the lack of references to Tomahawk missiles after this phone call, given what Putin was saying, the threats he was making earlier in the week, isn't something that we should focus on too much?
No individual weapon system is going to change the course of the war. I think there's a sort of belief that Russia's bound to win because they've got Iranian drones, or the Ukrainians have got this fantastic new missile called the Flamingo, and that's going to do tremendous damage. And all these weapon systems make an impact. But what matters in the end is the will to fight and the economic clout of both countries. And it's true that if it's Russia versus Ukraine, Ukraine in the end will lose. If it's Russia versus Europe, then Russia loses. And so long as the Europeans, and we saw the very important defence roadmap today coming out from the European Commission, so long as the Europeans are willing to put serious money into defence, and remember, Russia's got an economy the size of Italy. It's much, much smaller than the European Union, let alone the EU plus Britain or the whole of NATO. So I think we shouldn't get too carried away by what's fundamentally episodes in a reality TV show, and that's how Trump conducts diplomacy.
Hold our nerve, keep going. Edward Lucas, thank you very much indeed for talking to me. Now then, Virginia Goff, the woman who killed herself earlier in the year, says in her posthumous autobiography that Prince Andrew had sexually abused her when she was 17, considering it his birthright. After saying that he'd cut all contact with the sex criminal Jeffrey Epstein in 2010, it's emerged that Prince Andrew wrote to him in friendly terms the following year, saying, "It would seem that we're in this together." Well, it's another nightmare for the palace. Let's talk now to Andrew Lownie, author of Entitled, The Rise and Fall of the House of York. They've stripped away his military jobs, his military involvement. They've taken away his money. Is there anything else they can do?
Well, I think there's a great deal of public disquiet with what's happening, and I think they feel they have to do something. It is difficult. I mean, I think if he would voluntarily leave Royal Lodge, that would take some of the nightmare away. I think perhaps this is an opportunity for them to be a little bit more open about things like their finances and records, and use this as an opportunity to show that the royal family can be accountable and transparent in their dealings. But I think some of the other things, like taking away his dukedom and taking away the Knight of the Garter, those are slightly more complex, but they're certainly possible.
And they can't strip away the title Prince, because that goes back to a very sort of fundamental pieces of royal legislation, I think, right the way back to George V and then Elizabeth II.
Yes, I think, there's no point doing that, though it would mean that the Duchess of York wouldn't be able to sell her biscuits in future. But we do have, there are ways of doing things. He's still, I think, an honorary Vice Admiral. He's still a Councillor of State, though as a non-working royal, he can't be used. I think there are some sort of things that might perhaps satisfy some public disquiet that they were seen to do things. And of course, they can take away his shooting weekends, which may be the worst thing that can happen.
Absolutely. The thing that's really changed here, apart from Virginia Giuffre's very, very sad memoir giving some of the details about what happened, or she says what happened, he denies it, is that he appears to have lied about his last contact with Jeffrey Epstein. And the problem for the royal family is it's contaminating the entire institution at the moment. And yet, if they cut him off completely, they've got no control over how he makes money or who he associates himself with. They lose another kind of quite important method of control.
Well, they haven't been controlling him. They haven't really done the due diligence to see where he's making money. So I don't think that anything's going to change there. The worry is that he'll do a sort of Andrew Morton or Sarah Ferguson will, and someone will then do a book which will have some embarrassing secrets about the royal family. But they have pressure. They can use pressure on the children there. I think he's transferred his ambitions to his children. And I think as long as somehow they are protected, he may be able to be reined in. But I think the worry is that if they're too harsh on him, he could go rogue.
The portrait you painted in your excellent book isn't exactly attractive. And what do you think relations are like? Is there any relationship going on at the moment between Andrew and the King?
Well, I think, he's a younger brother of the king. I think the king feels an obligation to his mother to take care of him. I think he can see the reputational damage, as you say, it's infecting the body politic, and they need to cut off this limb. They need to get ahead of the story rather than constantly reacting to it. But there's no love lost between them. You
can't be fond or caring for your younger brother and also cut him off as a limb. It's one or the other.
Well, I think, a bit like the Queen, you have to put the monarchy ahead of family relations, and I think you have to be ruthless. And I think William is prepared to do that. I think the King hasn't reached that point yet.
A really, really interesting story. Thank you very, very much indeed for that. Now, is there anything that sounds more harmless, more reassuring than talcum powder? A legal case involving around 3,000 people is beginning against the pharmaceutical giant Johnson & Johnson. Now, it's important to note that Johnson & Johnson have denied all the allegations. Talc occurs naturally close to asbestos deposits, and asbestos, of course, causes cancer. Now, Tom Longstaff is a partner at KP Law, and he's leading the case, and he spoke with me just a little earlier.
Well, the claim that we are bringing in the UK is on behalf of a number of claimants, all of whom have had prolonged exposure to Johnson & Johnson's baby powder. And we say, as a result, have developed a number of types of cancer, including ovarian cancer and mesothelioma. The claim is really in three parts. So firstly, we say the talc itself is contaminated with asbestos, which is a known carcinogen and has been for many years. We say the talc itself was dangerous. And then thirdly, part of the allegations is that Johnson & Johnson have known about this risk for approximately 70 years and haven't disclosed the risk to consumers, not only in the UK, but around the globe, in fact, who have used mineral talc-based Johnson & Johnson's baby powder.
That's a massive, massive claim. Talc itself is a naturally occurring substance, I think. Just tell us a little bit about what talc is. We know what it looks like when you shake the bottle, but what is it?
So until 2023, Johnson & Johnson's baby powder was derived from mineral-based talcum powder. Talc, as you say, is a naturally occurring mineral. It's a mineral that's found in the ground, and it is known to be the softest mineral on Earth. In fact, it's the geological cousin of asbestos. So where you find talcum powder in the ground, you are likely to find asbestos. They are both hydrated forms of magnesium silicate, and when you mine the talc through a series of explosions and dig it from the ground, you are very likely to have small amounts of asbestos that is essentially grained into the talcum powder, and it's not possible to separate the two.
They're, as it were, tiny fibres of asbestos inside the talc, is that right?
That's correct. So our case is that the product sold in the UK has been tested, that small amounts of asbestos have been found in the talcum powder, but also over the years there have been a number of tests by other entities, including the FDA in the US. And at times, asbestos has been found in talcum powder. We also say that the Johnson & Johnson testing of talc was never sensitive enough to detect small amounts of asbestos. But even then, you can find positive results being returned to Johnson & Johnson.
Now, you say there's about 3,000 people involved in this case. This is the British case. Are there similar lawsuits carrying on around the world?
These claims have been brought in the United States for around 10 years. Some of those cases have resulted in a successful outcome for the claimants, where Johnson & Johnson have been ordered to pay damages. Johnson & Johnson have also successfully defended some of those cases, mainly on the basis that they succeeded in demonstrating that the talcum powder didn't cause cancer. But this is the first time the claim has been brought in the United Kingdom. There is also a claim being brought in Australia, in fact, that was filed in an Australian court last year. And that matter will progress in the coming months and years.
An awful lot of people will be thinking back to when their children were young and they were using talc on their children, and will be very worried about what you're saying. Do you have any? I know you're a lawyer, but do you have any advice to people who simply hear this story and are scared witless by it?
Well, the product now is made from cornstarch, which is known to be safe. There are no health hazards associated with cornstarch-based powder. But if you have used mineral-based talcum powder and you have developed ovarian cancer or mesothelioma, and you think you've been affected, then you can get in touch with KP Law and we can try to help. For many claimants, they have already signed up, and there will be opportunities in the coming months and years for more people to participate should they wish to do so.
Grim question, but has anybody died as a result, do you think, of cancer caused by talcum powder?
So part of our cohort, Andrew, is claims on behalf of relatives who act on behalf of individuals who have used the product and have since passed away. So there is a very large number of claimants who say that the use of talcum powder caused the cancer and eventually led to the death of their relative. At KP Law, we are bringing this case because we believe that claimants have developed cancer and have died by using this product that otherwise would not have died, would not have developed cancer. So we want to make sure that there is an avenue through which UK claimants can seek justice, as has been seen in the United States.
Final question. When did the mineral-based, or in your view, more dangerous talcum powder cease to be available?
So Johnson & Johnson stopped using mineral-based talcum powder in the United States and Canada in 2021. This followed a number of successful claims being brought in the United States. They then waited a further 2 years to discontinue the use of mineral-based talcum powder outside of the US and Canada and the rest of the world. So the answer to the question is it's been staggered over the past 4 years. Some manufacturers stopped using mineral-based talcum powder years ago. Johnson & Johnson continued until 2021 in the US and 2023 in respect of the rest of the world.
Well, this is an absolutely massive story. Tom Longstaff, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC about it.
Thank you.
And a statement issued by Johnson & Johnson says that all their baby powder was compliant with any required regulatory standards, did not contain asbestos, and does not cause cancer. A bruising poll today could signal a complete rewriting of the British political system come the next election, with the Green Party under Zach Polanski seemingly going from strength to strength. We'll talk about that and what has been another very tough week for the Prime Minister, with our top political panel coming next. By the time now, 6:48.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
Rachel Reeves has to fill a $40 billion black hole in the country's finances. You can only do that in one of two ways: cut spending or put up taxes. If taxes, which ones?
Ian Dale on LBC.
At TfL, we're helping to make bus journeys greener. Our entire bus fleet is 100% low or zero emission at the tailpipe, including those for our Superloop routes, helping improve air quality for all. And we'll have a fully zero-emission fleet by 2034. That is how we're making the greener way to travel brighter for everyone. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Greener than total estimated petrol and diesel car emissions.
When BP asked me to read the voiceover for their new Wild Bean Cafe ad, I thought I knew what to expect. But when they told me I'd be reading the script next to a mountain waterfall, on horseback, strumming a harp, in a hailstorm, naked, ow, 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 well, that was wildly unexpected. Just like Wild Bean Cafe having a freshly ground signature espresso blend for everything from Americanos to flat whites in a fuel station. Wowzers. Wild Bean Cafe, only at BP. Subject to availability at selected BP stores only.
I'm telling you, raise taxes, that's how.
Cut spending, less waste, more sense.
Move north, get more for your money.
Until winter hits your heating bill.
Fair.
Up to 9.13% annual return. We all agree that's strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to ignore.
Cufflink. Auto-invest property backed from £500. Visit cufflink.com. That's Kuflink. Register your interest today. Your capital is at risk. Tax rules apply to IF ISAs and may be subject to change. Cufflink is authorised and regulated by the FCA.
Leading Britain's Conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:50. We've had so many shocking polls in recent years, it takes a lot to get my eyebrows raised. But they were jumping when I saw the latest polling by a company called Find Out Now, showing Labour now down to 15 points, slightly below the Greens. Now, maybe it's an outlier or a blip, but this is quite a moment. It's a good place to start the discussion with my weekly political panel, today comprising Tom Scotson, or Scotson, I beg your pardon, Scotson, beg your pardon, Tom, of Politics Home, and Annabel Durham of the Daily Telegraph. Welcome to you both. Tom, let's start with you. As I said, this is not a polling company I know very well, but nonetheless, if this is remotely accurate, it is another terrible, terrible moment for the Prime Minister.
Yes, so this poll has shown Reform having a very healthy lead for a long time. They've had a huge lead over Labour for the majority of it. But what was really astonishing, and you touched upon it, Andrew, is that the Greens have now overtaken, only very slightly, Labour. And I think this kind of speaks to a real problem within Labour, is that they've been trying to court Reform voters for a long time, particularly with migration and showing real impetus to stop the votes. But at the same time, they're alienating a lot of younger voters, progressive activists, who have made the bulk of the party, particularly during Jeremy Corbyn's time, the activists, and they are losing them to the very charismatic leader, Zach Polanski of the Greens.
Rather than to Jeremy himself, of course, whose party is still a bit in the doldrums at the moment. Annabel, I read that the Greens have put on 30,000 members since Zach Polanski became leader not very long ago, and they're up to about 112, 120,000, which would put them way ahead of the Liberal Democrats, and I think ahead of the Conservatives as well.
Well, they're certainly going to overtake the Tories very soon if they haven't already.
So this is not just a polling story. There is a real movement across the country that may change things quite dramatically.
Possibly, although I think we've got to put that membership in context of the total population of this country and the number of people who are eligible
Hardly
to vote.
anybody's a member of any political party.
That's true, but it's still a very tiny proportion. And I suspect that there really is a cap on the number of people, Andrew, who will be willing to vote for the Green Party based on their current policies. You're talking about, Zach Polanski calling for legalising all drugs, having completely open borders, imposing a wealth tax, which will be extremely popular with some members of the electorate, but I don't know that it's going to have mass appeal. So I think that their support will be very deep, but perhaps quite narrow. I think, there is that wider story of the fracturing of the left, because we talk so much about what's happening on the right of British politics and how Reform are eating the Tory party's lunch. But actually, we're seeing a great deal now on the left, not just with the Greens, but with Jeremy Corbyn's new party, with independents, and of course the Liberal Democrats as well.
And even at this low point in their fortunes at the moment, Labour Party people say that come the next election, it's going to be a choice of them or Reform. And they think a lot of the people who've gone to the Greens or to Jeremy Corbyn's party or even to the Liberal Democrats will come back in their direction.
I'm not sure they can be that complacent. And let's not forget, they likely have further to fall, because if Rachel Reeves's October budget last year was unpopular, let's just wait and see how businesses and individuals, pensioners, anybody who owns any assets respond to the budget on November the 26th. She has a £22 billion black hole that she now needs to fill, and she raised taxes by £40 billion last year.
And said she wouldn't again.
And she said she wouldn't again. And of course, before the general election, she said that there wouldn't be any tax increases beyond those set out in the Labour Party manifesto, which ultimately amounted to the VAT on private school fees. Now, political parties are in real trouble once they fall below around 30%. That's when they struggle to translate, votes into seats. And the Tories have fallen much, much further below that watermark. So this will strike fear, I imagine, into the hearts of Labour strategists.
I think it absolutely will. Tom, people have been talking about the death of the Conservative Party, long before the Tory Party conference. And maybe with a few more weeks of this kind of polling, they'll be saying the same thing about the Labour Party. So our politics are in real flux. Can I ask you, however, Annabel was talking about the budget quite rightly, because that's the next big event. And we've had what we would call pitch rolling, or examples of trying to kind of, calm the pitch before she charges down it from Rachel Reeves, first with Sky and now today with The Guardian. And in both cases, she's saying broadest shoulders have to pay the most. Wealth is not the same thing as income. And it does seem that she is going for, therefore, capital gains tax, inheritance tax, taxes on gambling and various other things.
As you said, the economic figures that have come out today showed that 0.1% growth. Last month, we had a contraction, so we've had no growth. And it's quite ironic because the Labour Party's core aim before the general election was growth. Andy Burnham said in an interview with myself that he wanted growth on every other page of the election manifesto, and now it's very difficult to get those words out of any senior Labour politician. I think that they will look to go after voters that probably aren't already in their small coalition at the moment. And it's probably why you speak to some Labour MPs and they look at the triple lock and think, there's not that many pensioners that vote for us anymore. Could we go after this and get a huge amount of saving?
Personal view, the triple lock is absolutely outrageous. I think the intergenerational unfairness, what we are doing to younger voters in particular, who can't get onto the housing ladder, can't get a secure job, and all of that, compared with the relative largesse that's going to pensioners, £177 billion a year or so, Annabel. That's not something your readers would like to hear about. It's not something the Conservative Conference wanted to hear about. No party will move on this, but at some point we're going to have to deal with this problem.
I do wonder whether the Overton window is shifting ever so slightly on the triple lock as it becomes increasingly apparent how unaffordable it is when we've got an ageing population. You spoke to intergenerational conflict. It's no wonder that young people feel that it's deeply unfair that they are currently coughing up for a benefit for pensioners they know they will not get in their own retirement. The only thing I would say is I do have some sympathy with pensioners who hiss at the suggestion that the triple lock will be reduced to a single or a double lock, and that is that we have national insurance contributions in this country, which many people have been led to believe, and politicians won't disavow them of this notion, but been led to believe that they are saving up a little nest egg for their own retirement, and of course they're not.
It's a contributory thing. That's absolutely right. Let's finish, if we could, by talking about the big spy story, of course, because I've been observing it, minute by minute and all the allegations, and I find it very, very hard to be sure what kind of trouble Keir Starmer is in. Kemi Badenoch today said he had misled the House of Commons. What's your view?
I am not sure that there's that much cut through with the specifics of the China spy case, simply because it is quite complicated, and it's, we're going to publish written evidence. No, we're not going to publish written evidence, and meetings that didn't happen, but then they did happen, but this particular issue wasn't discussed. And it's quite difficult to follow, and it gets murkier with every day that passes. But I think the problem for the Labour Party, Labour government, is if this becomes a broader discussion over our relationship with China, because ultimately, if we need to decouple and de-risk from China, as I believe that we do, it's going to be extremely difficult to overhaul supply chains and that sort of thing.
And Tom, as we've been discussing on the show today, the next big choice comes over this mega embassy. We had Sir Richard Dearlove at the top of the show saying there's no way that we should agree to this big embassy. And at the moment it's being treated as a planning issue. Now, this seems a bit odd. What's your view about where the government's going to go on that. Are they going to take the risk of infuriating China by in the end saying no?
I think it's very difficult to see a situation now where the government allow this to happen. It's in the government's interest to kill this story. And because they obviously, of course, want closer relations with China, but also I think what this speaks to now is this uncertainty within Number 10. I think that even though there's a huge complexity around this case, the general public will see this as another head potentially to roll within Downing Street. And I think it's really within their interest now to try and find a way to move this on. And building an embassy in the heart of the capital isn't a way to get this story to go.
Tom Scotson, Annabel, Denham, thank you both very much indeed. Now, if you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you'd like them. You can pause, you can rewind for live radio, and you can listen to a range of podcasts. Download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Henry Riley. But right now, it's time for Ian Dale.
Thanks, Andrew.
A long-standing principle.